Hey there, welcome to this fully narrated real-time tutorial in Photoshop where I'm going to show you how I create this illustration you can see here. This is just an opportunity for me to share with you my process for how I create line and color illustrations in Photoshop. This is not a fast-paced, sped-up YouTube video with lots of jokes and quick cuts and editing. This is how it actually happens. This is how art is made with time and patience and just a lot of drawing. So if that's what you're into, stay tuned. Let's jump in and get started. Alright, just quickly, my name's Tim McBurney. I've been a professional working artist for 20 years and a professional drawing teacher for quite some time. I'm here to help you draw cool stuff from your imagination, to embrace the challenge of drawing and to master the craft of line and color illustration. And that really is what this video is about. I'm just sharing with you how I actually go about doing this. It's not edited, it's not fast, because I think it's really important to understand that art takes time and patience, and often there's little bits and pieces where we pause and we think and we get lost, and you just don't see that when you're looking at sped up slick tutorials that are meant to make things look easy. So that's why I'm here. Now, if you do want to learn how I'm doing what I'm doing, if you're interested in the manga, comics, bande dessinée style of illustration where we create worlds with simple line and color, you can check out my free quick start guide. It goes over the basics of how I create these types of illustrations, how I create basically all of my illustrations, and gives you some really simple tactics to get started doing the same thing in Photoshop. So go check that out. All right, let's jump in and get started. So again, we have a blank page, but again, I know sort of what I'm going to do, or at least this is my plan. What I want to do is take one of these characters. In this case, we're going to take one of the twins here from the LionRider's image or world that I've kind of created, and I'm just going to sort of do a design pass on her and try and figure out exactly how I can maybe make it a little bit more interesting and just get up on the the structure and get sort of used to drawing that character again. So that's what we're going to be doing, and I'm going to start out as I normally do, using a pretty big sort of brush to just sort of rough in the major forms there. That just means that I'm not going to sort of get lost with detail. Now again, you can start this small and you can make it bigger in Photoshop. I think that's like a really sort of good thing that Photoshop allows you to do. You can sort of make little thumbnails and things, and then just sort of, you don't need a light box or anything, you can just sort of make them bigger. And again, a lot of that depends how much I want to sort of play around with sort of gesture and structure, or gesture versus structure. If I'm really trying to come up with a dynamic pose, which I sort of am here, because I just feel like, again, the character kind of is, I just feel like it's going to sort of need something to make it interesting. And again, that's sort of what I want to explore, right? Like, how does the character sort of work? And again, this will be just a quick sort of little character sort of illustration. These are the sort of things I do. But yeah, when I'm trying to aim for gesture, I think making the image a little bit smaller, and really just trying to get a good, I'm gonna flip it, get a good little sort of action pose going, I think can be useful, right? You're going to tend to focus on those bigger shapes in that case, and I think that's where that can be sort of useful. So again, just playing around with how we're gonna do this, picking that sort of small, that big brush really helps here as well, right? It means that I'm not going to be able to mess up. I'm not going to run into any silly trouble where, you know, I accidentally just sort of start noodling away. And yeah, just playing around. Now again, whenever you're doing this whole idea of doing iterative drawings, one drawing on top of another drawing, is something that does take some practice to get used to. And that's because when you're doing these kind of like, you know, drawings like this, they don't really look like anything. They're not really that interesting. And we often are sort of drawn into adding detail instead of kind of refining the basic structure. And really, it does just take time to get used to understanding what you need to do at each stage. And that's why you just need to repeat yourself. You just need to go through the process again and again. There's no other way to get that experience, unfortunately. What you're looking for, as I always say, is to improve your spidey sense, your artistic spidey sense, where, and for anyone who's not into comics, that's just where Spider-Man has spidey sense, and he can kind of just tell when stuff's going down, right? When something bad's about to happen. And it's the same with art. I'm sort of looking at this, and I can tell from experience when I'm going to need to do something at this stage, right? When something at this stage is going to be important. And so that's why often you'll see me doing little bits and pieces and sort of fiddling over little things. And the reason that I might be doing little bits and pieces like that is just because I can sort of feel that might be a problem, right? I can sort of feel that might be annoying. You know, if I don't sort of address it. But yeah, again, this is a very simple sort of character, right? So I'm sort of posing the character to hopefully get a little bit more interest there. And again, I'll make this a bit bigger and keep flipping back and forwards. I think it can be good to, again, not flip back and forwards too much, because then you're really focusing on getting the structure right. I mean, I think flipping back and forwards is a good sort of technique to have, because it allows you to view that image from a different angle, and you often see mistakes. But at the same time, we want to correct as many mistakes as we can as we're doing it. And I think it can be really good to, before you flip, just really double down and say, okay, is there anything here that I can see is going to be a problem, and try and fix it. And then when you flip, you're probably going to see, you know, exactly what happened there, and like, oh yeah, that's what I was sort of missing. But the more we can do it to begin with, the better. So again, just trying to think about how to pose the character. Again, I'm not sure exactly how much. I'll flip it and save that. Again, not sure exactly how much there. Not sure how dynamic I want to make it, let's say. Now, this is a case of should I try and draw some more of her anatomy out, given that it's probably going to be covered? Yeah, I think that can often save a lot of time. It can often feel like, oh man, that's just wasted energy. I'm drawing stuff that I can't see. But the reality is that often those little things make the next phase a lot easier, because I do know where everything is, and I don't need to go and redraw and fuss around with it quite as much. you're more likely to be able to just go and put in this kind of dress and it's not going to be an issue. And this is one of the reasons why, I do these sort of designs, is to just figure out, like how do things like this dress work? Is it interesting? Does it work in an action pose? It's if you're just designing for video games or something, that's typically someone else's problem. When we're designing for comics, we have to consider all of those things. How does the design work when we view it from different angles? So you can see there, I'm like, maybe it would be better to have the pose be more dynamic. And again, maybe it would be good to have this overlap here. But again, this is another really good important point for posing, is you really need to make sure you get the priority straight. So one of the things I want this hand to be in a good spot here, right? Like around her body, so that I don't get too many weird tangents. And so if I place the hand first, then that can really help me to, let's get these shoulders right. I feel like these shoulders are a bit broad, which makes them feel a little bit too old. So yeah, now I can kind of, just with a little sort of posing, right, stick figure, I can try and place that arm. And then again, zoom out, we can flip, I can check to see like, oh, yeah, I think that arm's going to be a little bit longer. The reason I draw the arc is what I'm sort of trying to think of is bottom of rib cage, right? And then we've sort of got like an arc that will sort of define where the elbow is, because the elbow is going to hit the bottom of the rib cage. So that's why, again, I sort of trace up, and I'm trying to make sure that, again, these arms are kind of at roughly the right angle. Now, again, this arm could be sort of pushed forwards, right, foreshortened, and we could, see it at a different angle. But again, I'm trying to keep it fairly easy to read, right? Again, not a lot of foreshortening, because what I want to do is see the character in a fairly sort of simple pose. All right. So again, what we've got here, now what you can do, again, if you're working in this method where we've got a bigger brush, but maybe we get to a certain point where it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's not working. If you do want to sort of do another pass, what I'm going to do is step up the opacity a bit more, and I'm just going to have another go at defining the structure. But in this pass, what I'm doing is, so I've sort of got it roughed out and I've got a pretty good idea. Now, if I had more time and I was, going and I was going for a more sort of finished look, I think what I might do is, do more passes, right? You could obviously, really do a detailed pass here that's still sketchy. I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is a medium kind of second pass here, where I'm just focusing on structure. So I'm just focusing on making sure that like the structure of the face is kind of working, and that I sort of make sure, okay, these ears are sort of placed in the right spot. And the reason for that is I'm going to make up a lot of these details on the fly, but things that I don't want to be sort of fiddling around with too much are those sort of structural issues. I kind of want some of them figured out first. So things that I can focus on here are like, the center, right? Like, where's that center line? I'm focusing on just doing a quick pass, again, sort of 5 minutes or something, and just kind of making sure that, I'm putting in some of these structural markers. Again, that neck is quite long, but I'll see how that goes. So structural markers are like the collarbone, right? Like where is that sort of deltoid? Now, these are things that probably won't be put in, the final image. I'm not going to be putting in hugely striated muscles or anything, because it's a fairly sort of young girl that we're drawing. But, if I kind of put them in here and I put a little bit more structure in here, it means that it's a lot easier for me to draw it when the time comes. Right, same as the hand here, right? I can have a go at just sort of putting in the blockiness of the hand, and we'll think about where those fingers are going, right? And again, it's not, these are not finished lines, but it's a secondary pass on the structure. And what it'll mean is that, the image that I'm going to do here is not representative of the finished image that I'm going to create, but it's still building it up. And that's really what I recommend. And it's challenging because, again, I'm always recommending do a full process where you basically, do your construction drawing, you then create a fully, realized rough version of the drawing, and then you kind of do the finished lines after that. That's the thing that will give you the most reliable process, and that's what I recommend. When I'm doing these quick sort of real-time things, though, I'm often doing it sort of how I do it, right? So this is not necessarily sort of, how I recommend you learn to do it. This is just actually how I do it, and it's important to make that distinction because I'm going faster, I'm sort of skipping some steps. And again, that's why I have a mix of tutorials where some of them are sort of saying, look, this is what I recommend if you're at this stage. This is what I recommend if you're at that stage. And that's really a big part of what, a lot of my courses that, are sort of bigger paid courses are about, is figuring that stuff out, like really going in depth about what you should be focusing on at what particular stage. But again, this is sort of how I do it. And the simple analogy or idea that you can take away that allows you to use the same idea no matter what stage you're at is, what I'm looking for is the finished lines. And this is where, again, I feel like my sort of advice might differ, right, from a lot of people's. But what I'm And not because there's any controversy, just because, this is sort of how I view it, and I don't hear a lot of people sort of talking about it this way. I think it's really important to consider the final lines. The final lines are the thing that I'm going for. And if I could just make them up, right, if I could just, not have any of this and just do final lines, then that's what I do, because that would be quicker. And, hopefully it wouldn't be that stressful, But that would be quicker. That would be better, right? Just draw the final lines, But the problem is, I don't really know what I'm drawing, and I want to explore that. So the preparatory underdrawing is there to support the finished lines, and that's always the way that I think is best to view it. So we work backwards. What I want is finished lines, and the second question is like, well, why can't I draw those finished lines right now? Well, I don't know where they should be. I'm not 100% sure about the pose. I'm not 100% sure about the anatomy, etc. And that really is what I'm doing here. So the key is that as soon as I feel like, oh yeah, I could make that up, like with the face, I'm like, I'll be able to make that up in the finished lines. It's not ink, it's Photoshop. I can undo, I can erase, so I don't need to put in the features. Same thing here, I've got the rough idea of where the hands go. I know that I can complete that. Now, maybe the me that was 15 years ago wouldn't have been able to complete that. And if I'd only done that amount of sketching, I would have been in big trouble. That would have been, big trouble for me. Because I just haven't done the work, I haven't put in the structure. And what I would have need to have done, again, my spidey sense would probably have gone off, and I would have said, you need to draw those friggin' hands. You need to figure out what's there. Otherwise, that's going to come back to bite you. But again, the more you progress, the more you've, drawn hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of little hands based off, sort of little stick figure sketches, the more you're going to be able to just make them up, just, come up with something interesting. And again, that's what it's all about. So this stage is about you figuring out, what do you need? What do you need? And that changes from, day to day. Sometimes it's, a little bit. Sometimes it's a lot. It can depend on how you're feeling. Do you want to sort of be making stuff up? Do you want to be, on the edge of your seat? Do you want an engaging sort of drawing experience, or do you just want to sort of chill out? Is it something where you're working for a client and they need a highly polished illustration, and so you want to make 100% sure you're getting it right before you do finished lines? In that case, I think totally you need to do a full construction phase and figure out all the lines, and and maybe get feedback on those lines, and only go to the finished, quote unquote inked or finished polished lines, once you're 110% sure that's exactly what you need. Again, it is 100% dependent on what you need in terms of confidence to complete those finished lines. And that changes from year to year, day to day, right? It changes all the time. So don't worry about that, you know what I mean? Like whatever you need to do to get those finished lines sorted, then, go for it. All right. So again, with that said, I'm probably going to have a go at it like this. And again, these lines are sort of one pass, right? And it's a collection of, me sort of saying, oh, yeah, I'm probably going to draw the finished version of this in a few minutes. So it's not like I need to record anything. These are just kind of the first pass, and after that I'll have another go at it and, sort of see how that goes. So yeah, we don't need to be that polished with them, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, this stuff is totally dependent on you, and this is just me doing this, today. And again, sometimes I really want that extra, I want that extra support. I don't feel like winging it. And again, that might be because I'm picking a subject that's a little bit, newer, again, when I'm doing these real-time tutorials, I'm often picking stuff that's kind of, in my comfort zone. So, I'm not sort of sitting there having to, waste a few hours of your time, figuring out how to draw something that, I haven't sort of drawn before. That would be a different type of drawing exercise. So again, I'm picking stuff that mostly I kind of know. All right, so again, just sort of roughing in some of these sort of details. I think they've sort of got, I don't know whether I'll give them bare feet or put some sort of stuff there. And again, we've got a few different, I think one of the main things I was going to try and figure out was, again, I think there was like some sort of some sort of jewelry or something for here. I feel like this, it could be a bit sort of a bit higher there. Again, some kind of decoration just under the chest there. And we also have that, where is it, that kind of headpiece thing. And again, I'm not sure how much I want to sort of play around with that. But we'll do a little bit. just give a sort of simple necklace. Now again, I'm trying to make these things as simple as possible, because you know, if you have to draw a whole pile of these, then it does become really boring. If you've designed, for me anyway, if you've designed complicated jewelry and stuff, you know, that's where I start to check out and dislike my former self if I ever, you know, get too carried away with, you know, fancy drawing. All right, now let's flip that and see. I'm still not sure. I feel like it's probably going to have to be this way. I think it started the other way. Yeah, I think this is what we decided on though. Anyway, all right, so let's have a go at doing these finished lines. Let's get, boom, simple pencil. Now, even though again these are sort of finished lines, I'm going to set the pencil opacity to about 80, and this just allows me to just build up a little bit more. Right, it's not putting down 100% black at the beginning. So I'm just rearranging my screen. I've got my reference screen above that, you know, has a full sort of, you know, zoomed out version of this, and it also has the other kind of reference on it. And again, just I'll probably play around with that expression a little bit more as we go. So again, I'm not sure about this shape that I've sort of created here for the face. What I might do is just draw the whole thing in. And again, I've got a lot of sort of like overlapping stuff. If in doubt, just draw the stuff that, you know, you're kind of pretty sure is going to be on top, and see how that goes. Got these earrings here, we've got this stuff here. Again, not sure whether that stuff feels like it might not be delicate enough. Might be a bit harsh, but let's see how we go. And because before it was kind of just a, yeah, I'm not sure how much I'm feeling that. Let's have a go. Let's stick to the original. Oh, there we go. And I've done it on the wrong thing. Again, good way to extract that if you need. Let's go into channels. Let's select the black. I'm going to make a new layer. Control Shift I is going to invert. I'm going to hit D for default, which is black, and then we're going to fill that. And let's get rid of those. Let's make a new line and get back there. Rookie mistake. All right. Cool. So yeah, as I said, not 100% convinced about this. I think it might be just because it feels a little bit sort of contrived. Yeah, so again, if we're thinking about, you know, assessing the design and stuff like that, I think a good thing to do is often to just stick with what was there, see how that works. That's what I'm going to do now with that original design, which is a little bit more like sort of less fancy, a little bit more low tech. And then we'll just do some options. So we use it as a good opportunity to, you know, do some other design work later on. So I'm focusing here mostly on just cutting that line off the face. And that's why, again, I'm not 100% convinced about this line here. Maybe, again, the idea is they can kind of join up. It doesn't really make sense over here for that to be so thin. So again, you know, this is a pretty brutal way of going about. Yeah, it doesn't really. So I think what we might do is go back. So this is again where like making that stuff up doesn't work, but the point here is to have like sort of good, you know, in that brief. One of the things I want is, you know, in that sort of design, I want easy things to draw, right? So part of design is sort of figuring out, yeah, like what happens with the hair, you know, does it get too complicated? It's one of those things that, you know, if you draw it a few times, that's kind of okay. If we draw it, you know, a million times though, you just kind of want something simple. And that's why often, you know, cool stylized hair can be good, because it's, you know, sort of fun to draw. And so again, the kind of Art Nouveau hair is something that's kind of interesting, right? I like it, but can be a bit of a pain and a drawing logistical issue. But if you do sort of figure out a general set of rules for it, then I think that does make everything kind of easier. So we got this coming there, this, that over there, this here. That goes there, neck comes down there. Yeah, so again, what do we do here? So a good thing you can do is make a new layer, which I just did, and then you can kind of play around with those shapes and maybe move them around. Right, so again, we're above. And that means, again, we can just go back here and sort of erase that out and think about, like, does that work? Is that interesting? That's always the question. Is it good? Is it better? Is it worse? I'm going to keep it simpler. I think that will look better ultimately. Put some hair here. Alright, to sort of cover that up. Let's put a little shadow in there. Shadow. Alright, shadow. Yep, let's erase out sort of that. And again, the question is, like, does this overlap? That, yeah, I think that's a little bit more interesting. All right, let's merge that down. And again, so as we progress, these are going to sort of get a little bit easier, I hope, or I think. And also, you know, a big part of this is just getting your head right for, like, you know, the problems, the drawing problems, the overlaps. Which ones do you put in first? Where, you know, what's more likely to make it work? What's more likely to you know, get this happening? One of the things, again, I keep saying as a goal I have that I just don't often, you know, get around to fixing, is just I've never been that comfortable drawing hair. You know, I sort of tend to draw this kind of hair that kind of doesn't really have a hairstyle. You know, it's very sort of like static, and you know, I guess it's sort of, I feel like, you know, a lot of fantasy hair sort of doesn't have a style because, you know, it's, you know, they didn't have fancy hairstyling things back then, or, you know, it gives it a bit more of a natural kind of feel. But I do think it's you know, that's like a major weakness. So, you know, it's something I kind of work on, right? I need to kind of, you know, get my visual library for hairstyles working. But again, this basic idea of, you know, a lot of overlapping stuff, leaning on into that sort of Art Nouveau style, is something I've, you know, often been, you know, sort of trying, and I've sort of figured out kind of how it works. But still, it takes a while to kind of get your head back into it, right? Like, what's kind of working. And again, it can be good to, you know, make sure we're lined up on some of these curls and things. So again, it looking a little bit sort of ratty is kind of okay. I'm not too concerned about that. What I am trying to do is get a little bit more sort of overlap in there. And again, give things a bit more structure. And again, finding that sort of level, I think, can be tricky. This is, again, it's a visual library thing, and it's something that, you know, as I said, you got to sort of get your hand-eye coordination in for it. I feel like it's sort of getting there, but yeah, still feels awkward to me. That's what my spidey sense is telling me. It's like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but that's okay. Cool. So we've got, again, a bit of kind of overlap with some of the hair. Some complicated patterns and things. Maybe, I think there was like some of this hair was coming down. Let's make that one a little bit pointier. Actually, let's try and make it a little bit curlier. Again, we've got a weird tangent with that. With that hair. I think what I'll do is just move that up. So again, these lines will look a little bit sort of fussy, maybe. We'll see. Got, again, that kind of, so it's sort of getting lost. Get some weird tangents here. Again, we can kind of move some of this stuff about. See if we can cross this line here. So this is really what, we refer to as sort of micro composition, right? All the little arrangements and things that happen at that sort of small level, right? Just making sure all those little bits are kind of, as good as we can make them. Got this some can put small indication of that sort of clavicle there. See whether this is going to work. Yeah, all right. So sort of getting there, joining things up, starting to again, yeah, that feels a bit chunky to me. All right. Let's have a go at these hands. So let's get this line. All right, so we got 1, 2. Again, that'll do. Got a thumb there, maybe. Okay, it's gonna go over there. And then yeah, we've sort of got some straps and things. So this is where again it does get tricky, because you can see we haven't done like a full sort of draw through there, so now we've got to sort of make it up, and that's where, you know, life does become trickier. Well, so again, I'm going to follow the line of the body a bit more and hope that again we can sort of, hopefully we can add like a little bit of sort of structure to this without it sort of looking or feeling weird. Again, often just nothing is better. So we got this. Oh, let's round that off. So yeah, continuing these lines, right? And sort of, you know, you have one line, you erase it, you try and go again, right? That is a real art, you know, because if you sort of get it, if you get it right, you know, you really sort of can't tell the difference. If you get it wrong, you know, you can kind of tell there's a difference there. So that is a skill that, you know, it seems like, oh, you can just kind of erase those things. As you can see, some of these have turned out better than others. You know, again, that doesn't work. You can just kind of, you know, try and blend it out though. Again, I'm not sure about how much of that cloth indication I'm going to do. Because often just, you know, having nice lines is like an easy sort of solution. So yeah, again, not quite sure how much of that I'm going to put in. So again, I'm going to, you know, I am putting in the feet. I'm just going to put in some of these kind of straps. And might as well do it properly. Again, not that properly, but, you know, I was thinking maybe I could just get away with really scribbling. And again, I feel like that. That one was a bit long. I think that foot. So again, bit of a manky toe there, not really working that well. That's right. Hit this one, and I think these, let's make these less like wraps, sorry, less like sort of jewelry, more like wraps. Hope those fingers turn out alright. That seems okay. They don't seem super weird in terms of scale. Let's see if we can plus this again. Let's pull this like sort of skin up here from that, and let's see if again, we've got sort of a knuckle there, right? And again, oh, Photoshop's doing that weird thing. Pull this one down, just see if we can add a bit more stuff, right? So it's not just kind of like a whole bunch of sticks. Yeah, that's not quite. It's looking a bit weird. I feel like that could just be sort of straighter. And let's think about just doing a bit of drawing plussing here. All right, thinking about, you know, how we can push some of these little bits and pieces around. I feel like this is just messy. So is that's probably worse. So again, I want this one to be kind of round. Now, again, we can play with this expression. We can also put this a little bit closer. All right, that might help just the general feeling. No, I think that's got to go over to make it look sort of clean. So again, here it's a matter of like, well, where do these bits of hair kind of connect to? Again, mostly I'm just trying to sort of avoid flatness. Although the flatness there is a nice shape. Might be good to, again, kind of move, get a bit more depth there. Move this one. Here. And again, sort of have that overlap. Yeah, that looks, I reckon again, one of the things we could do is kind of leave a bit of space, right? Sort of around the have a bit more of these kind of breaking off. So again, just drawing here. This is like one of those things where I draw a forest, and yeah, it's like half the demo is just drawing trees, right? I mean, the thing here is, I'm not 100% convinced this is like any of this is actually making it better. But as I said, I do think that these types of things are an important part of the design process, because one of the things when I look at that original design, is like, I do kind of like that hair, but it is like a bit of a pain to kind of draw that. I'm not sure whether that, like, is that going to be worth it? Right? That's the question. Like, is it even worth it? Does it look that good? Should I just design something like way sort of simpler, right? That's actually gonna be more fun to draw. So yeah, let's what do we got here? Yeah, I mean, let's have a go. Let's see. I do feel like, we could probably have a bit more of like line there. I mean, yeah, this is going to be a flat color thing. So, it doesn't need to be sort of crazy detailed there, but yeah, I think it might be good here to kind of show that that's kind of hanging from the knee there. I don't know whether that is logical, or would sort of match up to reference. Mostly I'm just trying to sort of find some things to do which are going to help with sort of visual interest. So again, could try putting something there that's more sort of for looks, or again some sort of stuff to break up the silhouette, a little pouch or something. That's often what I kind of put there. All right, maybe a little bottle or something like that. Again, that sort of thing might just make it feel a little bit less kind of static. Because again, those characters were sort of just designed like, let's just draw something on this lion, And I think you can actually come up with really good designs that way. I think that is a solid idea, but often they need refining. You need to kind of be like, well, what does that look like? Is it just an interesting head design? What else could we do down there? Might have to redesign the clothes altogether. But anyway, I think that's what we need for the lines. So here's where, again, we'll start the flatting, and then I'll probably take a break, but it'll be a super quick non-break for you watching. This also would be a reason not to have silly hair like that. What? Silly hair like that in a designed for comic books, because again it's going to leave us with way more broken sort of little areas that are harder to flat. It's the sort of thing where even if you paid a flatter to do it, it's going to take them longer. And that's, mostly it's just going to be a pain for them, right? I don't think people who flat the comic book colors get paid extra if the work is complicated. They probably should, but yeah, it's just like, it's just time, right? And I guess that's the that's the real problem, is that anything that kind of increases time but doesn't make it actually look better is no good. So what we'll do, we'll have Crack run some actions on that, and we'll get ready. Just see what it looks like. It's probably the most important thing. Let's group all that, get rid of that. Now I think I want her to be brighter than the background. That's sort of my plan. So again, that's kind of what we will have. Yeah, so I think again there's some good things about that are kind of working. Again, I'll probably raise the, and it's always good again if you just want to sort of check, like, is this gonna work? All right, let's just again throw like a tiny bit of tone on there. Again, that's too harsh. Let's kind of the opacity, right? Like is sort of a standard tonal layout gonna work? Gonna be interesting. We'll have to see. Again, very simple image. I think it'd be good to get some sort of motion happening with the background. So when we're adding those shadows, let's see if we just kind of add. Let's do it that way. All right, so put on some sort of shadows. Again, that just sort of grounds the character, right? It's not like accurate shadow casting or anything. It's just like a bit of something, and get rid of that gradient. And here, just play around with, right? Like adding some sort of motion to it, which I think will kind of help fill in the image. So again, that's kind of the plan. I think that's sort of what we need to work with. And again, see if we can create some interesting shapes to kind of break up the kind of dynamic sort of image that she's got. Because I feel like without something there, it's going to be very lopsided. So if we can kind of create some dynamic lines with the background, even if it's going to be a simple background, if we do that a little bit, it will make it much, much, much more worthwhile. Anyway, let's, again, I'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll finish this color. All right, and magically, I am back. Here we go. Let's color this thing. So this background is just a placeholder. And I think it's often good to do that. You just put in a few marks and sort of give yourself confidence that if we move forward, that, adding some sort of dynamic lines here and, creating some diagonal movement is going to sort of solve some of the compositional problems that I sort of see here when we don't have that. So again, that's the major goal there. And the next thing to do is to think about, well, what color should this be, and how can we sort of organize the overall color scheme? So I'm going to try to bring the colors up and make them brighter. And it's important to start with a nice selection of colors if that's the case. So, by that I mean it's good to kind of get bright colors in there in the beginning and make sure that they're kind of hitting the right value goals. So what I'm looking for is, colors that are bright and certainly above the 50% grayscale level. So they're sort of brighter colors. For instance, this shadow is a 35 on the sort of value scale there. That means it's a bit dark, and that's okay because it's a shadow, but these are sort of, again, above that level. And that is just a good indication. If you can't always trust the screen, it's good to kind of use a few of those rules. All right, now next thing would be the character. And we're going to sort of start with simple sort of brighter orange color for the skin, and I'm going to use that as a base. And I can go Control U and play around with the color there, right? Again, make it a bit brighter, a bit lighter. See how we sort of go there. Again, often we will come back and change this a little bit later. Now there's a few major color choices here that we need to pay attention to. We've got the greeny blue. Let's hit 100% there. And again, that's going to be a little bit, all right, I'm sort of thinking again, something like that. But in many cases, it's just about putting things in and seeing what happens. So I'm not convinced that this is going to work from a color standpoint, but you know, it's sort of close, and so I'll put it in. A huge benefit of the line and color style is that it's very easy to change these colors, you know, all the way through the process. And that's really what makes a line and color process so unique and useful, is our ability to really focus on the color. It's what separates it from other sort of mediums, right? Where maybe we have to put in more rendering to show the form. It kind of separates the concept of rendering and sort of, you know, defining form and shape from the pure color we can put in. And it allows us some looks that, you know, really are only possible with the line and color style. So it's good to utilize that, utilize the things that this sort of technique and style is good at. And part of that process, again, is having techniques that allow us to change the colors easily. So you remember, again, I'm using the pencil tool here. Again, if you want more information on that, check out the quick start guide that goes over, you know, some of those little details in a bit more of a nuanced fashion. But the basic idea is that if we use the pencil tool as opposed to the brush tool in Photoshop, it allows very easy manipulation of the color simply by using the paint bucket tool. It's very easy to just change these colors because there's no subtlety to them. They're all just pure color. If we zoom up, and again, that's a small sort of technical point, but it does drastically change the way you think about the color. And it allows this process whereby we can potentially keep changing the colors as we go. You know, with no sort of negative impact, right? There's no negative impact at all. So here we go. And again, I think it's important to try and get close with the first few times you put the color in. And the reason for that is, I'll show you in a sec, actually. That's probably easier to sort of show. So for instance, here I've got this hair, and if we sort of, you know, roughly put things in, what you'll notice is I'm not 100% accurate on all these strokes, right? So there's a few little areas here where one of these you can see here, if we sort of zoom in there, you can see I haven't been quite 100% accurate. If we zoom in, you know, we can make those flat colors a lot more accurate. Right? But the thing is, when you notice, once you sort of zoom out, you don't really notice that. But if I make her hair darker, right? So we sort of make it a red or a dark brown. Now you can suddenly see that the marks that I've made here, where I've sort of skipped a few things, those are suddenly really ugly, right? So before, again, you don't notice them. And that's just because the tonal difference between the light hair and the skin tone are such that you don't notice that much contrast there. So they don't need to be as tight. But also the way that I've done it here is to just naturally use my eye to kind of say, what do I notice? What needs cleaning up? What doesn't need cleaning up? So you can see that here there is this sort of skin, and that's quite, there's quite a lot of sort of space there, and you can see when I sort of change it to be a darker color, you really notice this. Whereas if I went the other way and accidentally sort of went in there, now you really notice that. So, and you can see now that if I sort of swap this, now this looks really bad. So hopefully that makes sense. The most important takeaway is just that if you get the rough tonal arrangement right in the first place, you can be a lot looser because you will visually notice what things tend to sort of pop up and, turn up the most versus, if you change it later on, you sort of need to make sure that you're getting everything 100% accurate. So again, small little difference, but that's why I will sort of say, okay, let's make sure that the dress is a bright greeny blue. Exactly what flavor of greeny blue is not so important, all right? That's not the most important thing. What is important is that I get it sort of close tonally, and then what I'm doing is as I add the flat colors, I'm sort of making choices about how accurate I need to be. I think these are actually much more sort of blue, and you can see there, even again as I change the color, it sort of changes what is going to be acceptable in terms of accuracy of hitting the line. And again, controlling this basic idea is what will allow you to be able to flat and use a line and color style with rougher pencils. So, if you have 100% inked black line, then obviously you just, you need to make sure you're 100% there. But you can see that the style that I use is much more akin to a rougher pencil drawing, and the lines are not 100% black. They're not opaque. They are somewhat transparent. And again, the secret to that is understanding that you sort of need to make sure you put the color on the right side of the line, because again, if you just sort of put it slightly over on the wrong side, it's going to look really weird. So that looks weird, right? Whereas that, if there's a few little bits here, that doesn't look weird. Again, that's probably like a top level way of explaining what will and won't be acceptable. But the key is, if you aim to get the colors sort of close in the beginning, you'll be fine. And it means you can do the you can do this flatting of the color a lot rougher, which I think is really valuable. I think that's like a hugely valuable thing because it saves time. So what you'll notice is that, in most cases, I'm not being hyper anal retentive with this flatting. There's like a little bit of stuff here, there's a little bit of stuff there, but again, as long as you're putting in roughly the right sort of tonal arrangement in the beginning, you're fine. Sorry, that's like a super long way of explaining. It is actually a very complicated thing to explain, and it's one of the reasons why getting someone else to flat your comics or whatever, if you are using this kind of style, is not always the most effective thing to do, because it's not always just about getting all the lines 100% perfect, and that your need to kind of finesse that will increase drastically as you your need to do that will increase drastically the sketchier your art is. So, if you're dealing with very sort of sketchy art, then you can still use this style, but you have to pay very, very close attention to the tonality of the colors you put underneath, basically. And you can see again some of the books that I've sort of illustrated have that, have very, very rough, very, very rough lines, but they kind of hold together because the flats and the colors are kind of placed in an effective manner. All right, so again here we got to put in some kind of tonal for that, and you can see, if we sort of zoom out, that looks fine. If we zoom in, you can see it's a total mess, right? If I get rid of that, it's just, there's stuff everywhere, there's lines everywhere, bits and pieces missing. As soon as we put the lines on though, look, you're not going to notice that. And again, that's one of the major, paying attention to those efficiencies is one of the major things that will allow you to create art quicker, especially if it is just for sort of concept art or sort of comics. If you need it to be hyper polished, it's going to be printed really big, you're probably going to need to pay more attention to that stuff. All right, so again, that's getting kind of close. So once everything's in, I'm really not thinking too much about finessing things at this point. And again, as long as it's sort of looking okay, I'm probably not going to fuss over it, like the exact green of her dress, because I can always sort of color adjust things at the end. What I am focused on is just solving problems one after the other. What is the next thing that's most important that needs solving? Yeah. So again, just trying to make sure this stuff doesn't look too flat. All right, and we've got this here. So I feel like these are too dark. It's going to mix a bit of skin tone in with them. And again, the reason I'm doing that is just to make sure there's not as much value contrast here. I don't want there to be heaps of value contrast with everything. I just want there to be sort of color contrast. So I don't want these straps and things to be that much darker. I want the difference to be more about color and saturation. And that kind of, the goal there is just to sort of bring up all of those colors a little bit more. All right. And again, we'll probably add some kind of gradient there, but let's have a look at this background for the moment, see if we can make that more interesting. Let's step down in opacity. Oh, we need to go over the top of everything. So again, I'm just doing this with a lowered opacity and using this kind of brush. Again, the brush that I'm using is in that quick start guide, and the reason I use this is just because it gives me these kind of little textural marks quite easily. This is the same pencil sort of tool in Photoshop. I don't know why they call one pencil and one the sort of brush, but there you go. And so again, this allows me to sort of put in a bit of texture quite easily, and allows me to do what I'm doing now, which is make it more directional, right? Have an actual brush stroke, have an actual purpose to it. And I think that, again, is often something that's very useful to be able to sort of put in. I think this image would struggle a lot if we were just dealing with the character on a flat background. I think we need a bit of sort of motion to back up the hair, make that hair mean something, make sense a little bit. And yeah, there we go. So I'm just laying down again here the overall larger sort of shapes. Let's pull that shadow down a bit. And now I'm going to play around a little bit more with some sort of texture brushes, and this will just sort of smooth things out a little bit. Again, doing all these things on separate layers. And the goal here is to remove a little bit of the fine texture. That you can kind of, sorry, it's to add texture and remove a little bit of that sort of fine sort of fussiness, right? It's sort of bringing things together. See like how this is like quite sort of sharp. Well, again, my goal is to kind of get rid of all of that and add a layer of texture over the top. That's the idea anyway. So again, here's a good chance to sort of sit back and sort of check, look, is this working? Is this actually gonna function? I think it would be good to, again, you know, probably I'd take a break here, but if you're not sure and you need to kind of go ahead, another good thing about the line and color process in general is that we can be non-linear in the way we approach it. So I can sort of move forward with, you know, playing around with a couple of other things, and then, you know, come back to it if I need. So, you know, I don't need to, the point is there, I don't need to finish the background. I can kind of, you know, add a few things to the character, then tweak the background. I can even play around with tweaking the overall colors and then sort of see whether, you know, that works. And if that doesn't work, maybe I can add more sort of darkness to the background. We can play around with it like that. All right, so you can see there I did a very simple trick. I just put the background color as a gradient going up the character. What this does is it reduces the contrast we see around the bottom of the character, and that means that we can now see more contrast around the head of the character. It also gives us a feeling of ambient lighting. And yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm going to do, there's a couple of things again that I feel like might help blend the motion of the character into the background a little bit, and that is to use the simple sort of flying particle, sort of dust particle sort of thing that I normally use. A new layer again, and we've got these, and so I'm going to do one layer. Let's make another layer. Let's make them bigger, and this time, right, going to put a lot more of them, but let's try doing some tricks. Let's do blur, motion blur. Again, get the angle right. I think that was blurring them too much. Now they're kind of being blurred a little bit less. Can go there with that one. Filter, motion blur, so you can see now there's like a little bit more movement there, and we're sort of picking that up. It does make things a lot softer though, so it can be good to just go over the top of everything and again add some sort of sharper sort of movement there. And that's because obviously the motion blur blows everything. I'll just make sure that's fully on screen there so you can see it. I'm checking my other monitor to do a lot of this stuff. And again, obviously another sort of simple thing that we can do is to carry that sort of across to the top of the character. And again, I don't often have a rhyme or reason for, like why I'm picking the particular colors or whatever, just kind of putting it everywhere, and then we can sort of, get rid of it in some places. And let's do filter motion blur on that. Again, you can kind of see that happening. Cool. Now let's do another layer, and we'll go back to sort of that splatter texture. I'm going to set it to sort of 10%, super low, and just see if we can kind of bring some of these tonalities together. Set it to 20%, see if we keep going. And you can see again, this is pushing things down. It's getting rid of the, a lot of that value contrast, and it's adding more of a sense of ambient light, like there's atmosphere in there. Now again, it's a matter of how much of that do we want, how much do we want to sort of keep, how much can I erase, etc., etc. And other things I can sort of play around with are to, if we get brush, so yeah, just putting some sort of darker colors as a silhouette, pushing the character up a bit, right? So making it feel as if there's a bit of light, right, coming from the top there. And one of the things that does do is it brings a lot of this foreground sort of stuff to the fore a lot more. And again, what we can also do is play around with that on the background. So that's just the same one that I had there, just that sort of simple gradient down. But you can see that is doing, right, that is doing the thing that I sort of wanted it to do, whereby it sort of brings out the face a little bit. Again, we can sort of play around with that, put in airbrush in a little bit more. Maybe not, maybe keep it the same. Again, what's happening, I don't really know, right? Like, is it a snowstorm or something like that? Hard to say. All right, so once we've just playing around with this now that I've got those different colors in there. And let's try sort of maybe pushing some of the focus around. Now I've still got, I've got some interesting stuff here. I've got some of these sort of layers that probably could be used to help color adjust and, maybe increase, now that I've kind of softened it all down, right? Again, we can maybe sort of bring back some of that overall motion that was there, right? Some of that tonality. So again, all I'm doing is I'm finding this selection, which is just this, right? Where is it? Yeah, like this layer minus the character layer. So again, you can always bring back that texture. If you've got it on a layer, you layer things, move it around, play around. Now, one of the problems is if I get eyedropper, I'm now moving a little bit. You see, I'm sort of dipping down into darker colors in the background, where it's sort of this is sort of at 60, but it's still staying pretty bright, right? This skin texture is still at sort of 65. So again, that tells me, look, I'm not just pushing things down way too much. It'll be okay. And again, here I can sort of fade out some of these contrasty marks around the periphery, right? Often we can have some of these marks be they might be distracting just at the very edge of the image. So I'm kind of just getting rid of them. See if that works or doesn't work. Yeah, might be better to do that some other way. All right, so now let's play around with that color adjustment and see whether, what we've got could work or not. So again, I always like to sort of move stuff a little bit warmer because, again, that's going to give us a little bit more appeal. And again, I kind of like that sort of vibe. I think that sort of look really fits the the kind of overall look that we had. So again, I'm just playing around with different colors. What was on there? Select. That kind of works. Yeah, so that's just selecting those kind of whites. All right, let's maybe see if we can push some of the stuff down towards the blue. Get some sort of bluer blues. Oh, that looks cool. Looks interesting. So again, mostly when I'm doing this, I'm just playing around, right? Just seeing like what works. And I mean, one of the major things that I think does tend to work well is, really sort of pushing just simple, warm, cool contrast, and also layering it, right? I do think it is good to layer these things. You're much more likely to end up with a more sophisticated look in the end. So that's still doing that same thing. Yeah, so if you kind of layer these things up, I think often we'll end up with a more interesting look than just in terms of, the subtleties of the colors changing and messing around. Be very hard to kind of get that same look, just by doing a single color adjustment. That's kind of my experience of it anyway. All right, so now I am just going to try and see, okay, can we adjust the colors there? So I think one of the things is, again, we've got those kind of greens. All right, so maybe if we just make them not quite as extreme. Still got those neutrals. So here again, what I've done is I've made that color at the select color range adjustment, and I'm just working within that mask, and that allows me to kind of push things around. So again, very easy to just kind of get blind to stuff at this point. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it a little bit more like that, I think, where, it's kind of like a little bit more toned down. But I might do another, play around with some of those sort of color grades later on. You don't have to nail that 100%. On the day. I think it can be really useful to play around with that. And here again, I'm just going to do a little bit more of that. Spraying stuff around, adding a little bit of drama. And here again, you can play around with, removing some of these things. That's that sort of layer where I put a lot of texture on there. Maybe if I do want a little bit more punch, right, where the actual character is, maybe that will kind of help. And this is what I mean by, your process not needing to be, a linear process. You can often play around with these things, you know, and sort of say, oh, what does that look like, right? Like, what does that look like? Maybe if we did, you know, less of that, that might actually be sort of better. Very hard to tell. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the flatness of that, even though it doesn't make a lot of, you know, it's probably less dramatic or interesting. But again, there's something about not trying to, you know, pretend that there's lighting there, which is sort of useful. Right. Again, if we do too much, I mean, that's a much more dramatic image. And again, that's always the balance, right? This is what color adjustments are about. This is what sort of final grading is about. It's like, do we want drama? Do we want it to be sort of super, you know, super punchy, or is it okay if it's not super punchy? Again, I kind of like that. Maybe it's a bit more dramatic overall. Try punching up some of these. Let's see if we can get a few things to be more dramatic. Again, just pushing the color of the hair, that might be something that's worth entertaining. Again, hard to know how much to sort of push it. But again, something like that might be good. And then we could go, all right, maybe let's take out some of that color adjustment from the background, right? Because we, again, I do want to sort of make the character come forward a little bit. Maybe not quite that much. All right, but yeah, so I think again that's sort of getting pretty close. Hard to know how much of that to leave in there. This is where, as I keep saying, it's a really good idea to just come back to it later, see what works, see what doesn't work, see what's interesting the next day. But I think we can probably leave it there, and then again come back and see what happens. And again, here we can, you know, you can play around with turning these layers off, turning them on, right? Sort of saying like, oh, maybe we should, you know, reduce the opacity of that. Maybe that's a bit much. Hard to say. You know, again, we had a bit more on that before. And this is sort of this side of it. Again, it's not the best from a demo perspective because it's lots of fiddling around. But you know, I think often this is, you know, some of the more important aspects to creating images, right? It's often, you know, those things aren't necessarily the most important, but there's often feelings in your thumbnail or your idea that kind of don't quite make it through, and you know, this is kind of how we, you know, adjust that and finesse that. But yeah, I think we'll kind of leave that there. Again, you can always keep kind of color adjusting. You can keep adding sort of, you know, levels and things like that, adding a little bit of contrast. In many ways, what we're trying to do is, you know, adjust it for a particular screen, which is going to be different. You know, this will look different on your screen that you're looking at this on versus my screen. And if you were going to print it, you'd sort of adjust it differently. You know, sometimes if this gets put on the YouTube thumbnail, you know, I'll punch the contrast of it up a little bit so it sort of stands out more. You know, if it was going to be a big poster, I'd probably, you know, make sure it's a little bit more subtle, maybe refine things. But anyway, that is the basic idea. That's all we've got. If you are sort of wondering how I'm doing any particular thing here, you know, you're not sure about it, yeah, really good idea is to check out that quick start guide. It goes over all of those things in, you know, a lot of detail. and gives you just an idea about how I normally go about making this type of illustration. So go check that out. Other than that, that's all I got. Catch you around. Happy drawing.